Nobody circles something in a medical file after 17 years. Teresa Banks did it on a Tuesday morning, in red pen, for minutes into a session she was hired to run and not to question. She drew a careful circle around one word on page, one of a document nobody had reopened since Victor Marsh turned 37. The word was complete. Victor looked at the circle, then at her face. His voice came out the way it always did, controlled, level, the voice of a man who kept everything above the surface because what lay beneath was not available for discussion. You want to explain what you're doing? It was not a question. The classification on this form, Teresa said, is wrong. I have seen 30 specialists. The pen Victor had been holding dropped onto the floor. He didn't look at it, didn't reach for it. He sat with his hands open on his wheelchair armrests and looked at Teresa with the stillness of a man whose body had just said something his voice was not ready to say. Against the wall beside the door, 2 pairs of shoes sat polished and waiting. They had been waiting for 17 years. Before I go any further with this story, I need to ask you something. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My wife said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. She doesn't believe stories like this matter enough for people to stop and listen. I believe she's wrong. Not because I need the number, but because Victor's story, Teresa's story, those shoes sitting by a door for 17 years, these things deserve to be heard. And the only way I can keep telling them is if you help me show her that they do. Hit subscribe. Right now. Before we go any further, let's prove her wrong together. Teresa Banks had not planned to be here. 3 years earlier, she had a caseload of 40 patients at Riverside Regional, a department chair who valued her work, and a daughter she could pick up by 4 o'clock. Then the hospital system restructured. Her department was absorbed. Her position was eliminated in the same memo, on the same Tuesday, without a conversation. She was 36 years old with 9 years of clinical experience, a daughter named Maya, and rent due in 18 days. Private cases were not what she had trained for. They were what she could get. She took 3 that first month, working from clients' homes with her own equipment, and a referral from a colleague who felt guilty about not fighting harder for her job. Victor Marsh came through that same colleague 4 months later. Highest paying case she'd been offered. She didn't ask why the others had left. She found out soon enough. It happened in the first session. What she noticed by the third, and what no therapist before her had entered into any record, began with something small. Victor's left toe moved. Not on command. Not voluntarily. A slight, involuntary displacement she caught only because she was watching the foot while adjusting the ankle positioning. She said nothing. She noted it. She returned the following session with a borrowed thermal imaging unit and ran a quiet assessment while Victor answered emails on his phone. His right knee showed thermal differentiation, a temperature variance between the medial and lateral surface that had no business being there in a complete spinal injury. She drove home that evening and sat at the kitchen table with Victor's original intake file. Page 1. Line 4. Complete injury. Asia A. Signed by Dr. Roger Hallis. Filed at 2:14 a.m. in an emergency room 17 years ago. Dr. Hallis was not a spinal specialist. Teresa read the line 4 more times. Then she turned to the subsequent records, the specialists, the assessments, the treatment plan spanning 17 years, and saw what she suspected. Every one of them had been built on that first document. None of them had started from the patient. None had asked Victor Marsh what he could feel. She was still at the table when Maya appeared in the doorway at 11:30. "Mom, come to bed." "In a minute," Teresa said. She turned herself back to page 1. She requested the full medical archive on a Wednesday morning. Victor received the request in an email from his executive assistant, who had forwarded Teresa's message with a 1-line annotation. She wants everything. He approved it without reply. 6 hours later, 6 boxes arrived in the therapy room. Teresa spent the first hour simply organizing them by date. Earliest materials on the left. Most recent on the right. 17 years of paper laid out across the floor in chronological order. The physical weight of a man's medical history measured in cardboard and manila folders. She started at the beginning. The original admission form from Hargrove Memorial Hospital. October 14th, 11:17 at night. Victor Marsh, 37, brought in by ambulance following a single vehicle collision on the interstate. Spinal impact documented at point of entry. Emergency surgical intervention performed. Postoperative classification filed by the attending physician at 2:14 a.m. Dr. Roger Hallis. General emergency medicine. Teresa looked up the name. Board certified in emergency medicine. 17 years of practice. No spinal subspecialty training. No fellowship in neurotrauma. A competent physician making a classification in the first hours after a catastrophic accident, under pressure, in the middle of the night, without a spinal specialist present. Complete injury. Asia A. She wrote the time in her notebook. 2:14 a.m., then she wrote 2 words beneath it. Who else? Nobody else. Not that night. 6 weeks post-injury. An MRI report filed by a radiologist at the same hospital. Teresa read the language 3 times before she wrote anything down. Cord signal demonstrates some residual activity at L1, L2. Findings are anomalous given the presenting classification. Recommend specialist review. She set the report down. The radiologist had flagged it. In writing. In an official report attached to Victor's file. Recommend specialist review. 3 words that should have changed everything. She found the follow-up note from the consulting spinal specialist, dated 9 days later. She read it once. Then she put it face down on the floor and did not pick it up again for 20 minutes. The specialist had dismissed the radiologist's flag. Not because the finding was incorrect. Because the original Asia A classification was already in the file. Because the assumption of complete injury was already embedded in every note, every chart, every conversation that had happened in the 6 weeks since Victor arrived by ambulance. The specialist had not re-examined the classification. He had trusted it. He had written 4 sentences explaining why the MRI anomaly was consistent with a complete injury, and filed them behind the flag. The flag had not been raised again. Folder 4 of 6. Year 3 of treatment. Teresa almost missed it. The note was filed between 2 physical therapy discharge summaries from providers who had both left Victor's case within weeks of starting. It was handwritten, which was why it hadn't been digitized into the main record. She held it up to read the handwriting. Patient reports occasional sensation in left foot during session. Described as intermittent pressure rather than pain. Unable to replicate in clinical setting. No follow-up indicated at this time. She read it 3 times. Unable to replicate in clinical setting. No follow-up indicated at this time. Victor had told a therapist in year 3 that he could feel his left foot, and the therapist had filed the note and moved on. Teresa sat on the floor with folder 4 in her lap, the other 5 boxes arranged around her, and understood for the first time the full shape of what had happened. It was not one mistake. It was a system that had closed around a single wrong word at 2:14 a.m. and defended it for 17 years, not through malice, but through the accumulated weight of every professional who had trusted the document instead of the man in the chair. She made one call that evening. Dr. Sandra Reeves, spinal cord injury specialist, Johns Hopkins Medical Center. Teresa had read 3 of her published papers in the car outside Victor's building before dialing. She described the case without naming the patient. The original classification, the radiologist's flag, the MRI anomaly, the handwritten note from year 3. She spoke for 11 minutes without interruption. Dr. Reeves was silent for a long time after Teresa finished. Then she said, "Nobody ever asked him what he could feel. Not as a question, not as a diagnosis. As the sentence you say when you have read enough files across enough years to know that what Teresa had just described was not an outlier. Can you fly in?" Teresa asked. "Send me the file tonight," Dr. Reeves said. "I'll clear my Friday." Teresa hung up. She walked through the therapy room to collect her things. On her way out she passed the shoes by the door, 2 pairs, polished, waiting, and she stopped. She picked one up. She held it for a moment. Set it back down carefully, the way you set something down when you are not yet ready to say out loud what it means. She was almost ready. Victor Marsh does not raise his voice. That is the first thing you need to understand about him. In 17 years of boardrooms, depositions, hostile acquisitions, and a paralysis that rewrote every plan he had ever made for his life, Victor Marsh has never been the man who shouts. He is the man who goes very still, who gets very quiet, who makes the air in the room feel thin. He goes very still now. Teresa has placed the file on the desk between them, not handed it to him, placed it, the way you place evidence. She has walked him through the 4 layers. The ER form, the flagged MRI, the buried therapy note from year 3. Dr. Sandra Reeves on the phone, going quiet before she says the words. Victor looks at the file for a long time. Then he looks at Teresa. "You are telling me," he says, "that a physician I have never met, working at 2:14 in the morning, wrote 1 word on 1 form, and that every specialist I have seen in 4 countries, every treatment protocol, every conversation I have had about my own future for the last 17 years was built on that word. Yes, Teresa says. And you found this? Yes. You. A pause so precise it feels engineered. A private therapist working out of my spare room who needed this case to make rent. Teresa doesn't flinch. I found it because I was looking at what I could see, not at what the file said to expect. The silence that follows is not the silence of a man considering new information. It is the silence of a man deciding whether he can survive it. This is where the script does something Video 7 understood at its deepest level. The revelation is not the hardest moment. The reversal is. Michael Grant could prove the will was forged. He could name the man who forged it. What he could not do, what no document could do, was give Daniel back the years he spent believing the wrong thing. Teresa can prove the classification was wrong. She can name the night it happened. What she cannot do is give Victor back 17 years of decisions made from a false starting point. That is not hope she is handing him across the desk. That is a second injury. He asks her to leave. Not unkindly. Victor Marsh is never unkind in the way that costs him anything. He is precise, surgical, final. He thanks her for her work. He tells her Dr. Reeves will receive her documentation. He tells her he will be in touch about the remainder of her contract. He does not tell her she is wrong. Teresa drives home with the file on the passenger seat. She sits at the kitchen table at midnight with 6 boxes of medical records spread across it. Folders opened, pages flagged, 17 years arranged by date. Maya finds her there, 9 years old, in socks with stars on them, standing in the kitchen doorway at midnight. "Why are you still up?" Teresa asks. Maya looks at the files, at her mother's face. "Do you believe you're right?" Maya asks. Teresa looks at her daughter for a moment. "Yes." "Then go back." While Teresa rebuilds the case, calling Dr. Reeves again, cross-referencing the flagged MRI against updated Asia classification criteria, preparing a second presentation with the language Victor will need to hear as a businessman, not a patient, Victor Marsh is facing the parallel crisis. If the paralysis was misclassified, what did he stop reaching for? He thinks about the company he restructured entirely, so he would never have to travel. The relationships he ended because he decided he had nothing left to offer someone standing up. The version of himself he buried in year 2, quietly, without a ceremony, because the file said that version was gone, and he had always been a man who trusted documentation. He thinks about the shoes by the door. He has never told anyone about the shoes. He has never explained why he keeps them polished. He barely allows himself to think about it directly, the way you avoid looking at something that hurts in a register you cannot afford right now. The shoes are not hope. Victor Marsh does not keep them out of hope. He keeps them because throwing them away would be the last thing. And he has always known, somewhere beneath the documentation, beneath the 30 specialists and 4 countries and 17 years of accepted permanence, that the last thing had not happened yet. He just did not know how to say that to anyone. Teresa comes back. She does not call ahead. She arrives at 9 in the morning with the second presentation in a folder and Maya beside her. School doesn't start for an hour. There was no one else. Victor's assistant moves to intercept them at the door. Victor waves them through. Maya walks into the therapy room ahead of her mother. She looks around the space the way 9-year-olds look at spaces, cataloging, unhurried, committed to nothing yet. She sees the shoes. She sits down across from Victor and looks at him with the particular directness that children have before they learn to perform uncertainty. "Do you ever try to feel your feet?" she asks. Victor looks at her. The question is so simple it has no defenses built around it. He looks at her for a long time. Then slowly he looks down at his feet. Nobody speaks. And in the silence of that room, Teresa standing in the doorway, Maya watching with her hands in her lap, the folder on the table still unopened, Victor Marsh tries. For the first time in 17 years, without documentation permitting it, without a specialist present, without anyone having told him the outcome in advance. He tries. Dr. Sandra Reeves flies in on a Tuesday. She does not announce it as a significant occasion. She arrives with a colleague, a portable assessment kit, and the particular manner of someone who has spent 30 years delivering news that reorganizes lives, measured, unhurried, giving nothing away before the data gives it first. She shakes Victor's hand. She reads through Teresa's second presentation without comment. Then she begins. The evaluation takes 4 hours. Teresa waits in the hallway with Maya's homework spread across her lap, marking fractions she can barely focus on. At one point she hears Victor's voice through the door, not the words, just the register. Controlled. Asking questions. The voice of a man who built $1 billion company by demanding to understand the mechanism before he trusted the outcome. At hour 3, there is a long silence. At hour 4, the door opens. Dr. Reeves finds Teresa in the hallway. She does not perform the moment. She simply says what the evaluation found, in the plainest language available to her, because plain language is the only kind that doesn't collapse under the weight of what it is carrying. The original classification was incorrect. Victor has an incomplete spinal cord injury. We are looking at an Asia C presentation, possibly B in the lower segments. Targeted neurological rehabilitation is indicated. Movement is not guaranteed. She pauses, but it is no longer ruled out. Teresa nods. She does not cry in the hallway. She waits until she is in the car with Maya buckled into the passenger seat and the folder on the dashboard, and then she sits for 4 minutes without starting the engine. Maya does not ask what is wrong. She seems to understand, the way children sometimes do, that this is not sadness. That there is a kind of feeling for which crying is simply the nearest available exit. Victor does not celebrate. This is important to understand about him. He is not a man who celebrates, he is a man who moves. He calls his legal team that evening and gives them 2 instructions. First, obtain the original classification form, the attending physician's records, and every downstream document that referenced the ER finding. Second, he is not interested in punishment. He is interested in correction. What follows is not a lawsuit. It is a reckoning conducted entirely in paperwork, which is fitting, because paperwork is where the damage began. The original form is retrieved. The word complete is formally documented as a misclassification. The amended classification, incomplete, Asia C, is entered into Victor's medical record 17 years, 4 months, and 11 days after the first one. 1 word removed. 1 word entered. The entire architecture of a life, waiting to be rebuilt from a corrected foundation. The rehabilitation is slow. Teresa needs to be honest about this, because the story is not the one where the right diagnosis produces instant restoration. The story is the one where Victor Marsh, at 51, learns to ask his body questions it has not been asked in nearly 2 decades, and waits, with a patience he did not know he possessed, for the answers. The left toe moves first. Deliberately now, not involuntarily. He watches it during a session, and Teresa watches him watch it, and neither of them speaks for a long time because some moments do not need narration. His right knee responds to targeted stimulation in week 3. Sensation in the left foot, the same foot Maya asked about, sitting across from him with her hands in her lap, begins to register in week 7. Not fully, not consistently, but present. Undeniably, documentably, medically present. Teresa places 1 shoe on the floor in front of him that day. She does not explain why. She sets it down and steps back. Victor looks at the shoe for a long time. Then he looks up at her. I kept them polished, he says. 17 years. I don't know why. Teresa says nothing, because she does know why, and she understands that he knows too, and that the knowing does not need to be spoken out loud to be true. 6 months later. A medical conference in Chicago. Spinal cord injury classification and emergency diagnostic protocols. A room full of specialists, administrators, residency directors, and the people who write the forms that get filed at 2 a.m. and govern everything that follows. Victor walks to the podium. Assisted. Slowly. With the particular concentration of a man relearning something the body was always capable of and was simply never asked to do. The room is quiet in the way rooms go quiet when they understand they are watching something that costs something. He reaches the podium. He settles. He looks out at the room. He says 1 sentence before the prepared remarks. For 17 years, nobody asked me what I could feel. 1 person asked. And that changed everything. The ripple does not stop at Victor. Teresa's position at Mercy General is reinstated within the year. Victor funds a rehabilitation wing. 1 condition attached, non-negotiable, written into the donation agreement in language his legal team drafted and Teresa approved word by word. Mandatory second opinion protocol for all emergency spinal cord classifications filed between midnight and 6 in the morning. 1-time window. 1 protocol. Built from 1 error that lived in 1 word on 1 form. Maya's question, why does he keep shoes if he can't walk, becomes the title of a patient advocacy pamphlet. Teresa writes it over 3 weekends at the same kitchen table, where Maya found her at midnight with the files spread out and the answer not yet found. The pamphlet is distributed across 12 hospitals. It is written in plain language, the kind that does not require a medical degree to trust. Victor's first public steps are not at a conference. They are not photographed. They happen in Teresa's kitchen, at Maya's 10th birthday party, on a Saturday afternoon with balloons taped to the cabinet doors and a chocolate cake with uneven frosting because Maya insisted on decorating it herself. He crosses the kitchen. 6 steps. Assisted, slow, deliberate. Maya watches him with her hands pressed together in front of her mouth. When he reaches the other side, she drops her hands and claps, both arms above her head, elbows fully extended, the way children clap when the feeling is too large for the hands alone. No cameras, no announcement, just a room where the right question was finally asked, and a man who had the answer in him the whole time.